Hey, this is Betsy.
And this is Gina, and this is the Lost and Found podcast.
Our podcast is really a labor of love, and it came about a couple years ago when we recognized that we have some incredibly interesting, passionate entrepreneurs. We're making this for you guys. If you're listening, we've made this for you because it's created for our alumni community. These are small business owners and entrepreneurs. We're in the trenches together, but the stories that we can share, I think, will help you feel less alone, get you inspired, maybe even inspire you to connect with these people.
Real stories from real entrepreneurs in small communities. Welcome back to the Lost and Found podcast. Here we are today with a very exciting episode. Sarah Swedburg is with us in the studio, and we are very happy to have her on board. Sarah has had a lot of roles in this community and plays a very important leadership role in, Kandiyohi County, in Willmar, in downtown Willmar. You've kind of done it all, and everything that I hear is Sarah is incredible. Sarah has helped us. Sarah has really made an impact. So to have you here today and have a discussion for our small business owners, this is a big deal for us. So Sarah Swedburg, welcome to the Lost and Found podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Sarah, your current role, you are the Business Development Director for the Kandiyohi County EDC.
Yeah, correct.
But you've been on a journey to get to that role.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, in today's conversation, maybe that's how we should start. Why don't you tell us about how did you get to Willmar? What's your origin story, and how did you get to where you are now?
Totally. So I grew up in northern Minnesota, Bemidji, kind of Walker. I graduated from high school in Walker and graduated from College of Bemidji, but my grandparents have lived in Bemidji for decades upon decades, right across from the Arch, if you're familiar with Bemidji State. So very near and dear place to me and to kind of growing up. I grew up I think I've been reflecting a lot lately on the fact that I grew up in entrepreneurship in small places. I worked for a small woman-owned grocery store that started out of her garage, providing better access to fresh organic produce, right, that transformed into a brick and mortar and now is a restaurant, and just very near and dear to my heart. And I think that really shaped a lot of who I am, and this reconnection to small businesses. I graduated from Bemidji State University with a degree in geography. And so a geographer by trade who has a degree in city planning that never thought she'd be a city planner. We all get there eventually. So we actually came to Willmar. So I was dating my husband at the time, and we grew up in Walker together and had kind of parted ways. We never really had connected in high school other than I equate Walker to Spicer, New London, right? We have a graduating class of 50, everybody, resort town on a lake, all of that good stuff. And he was going to Southwest State at the time in Marshall. And so I was just looking for an opportunity to pull me down this way after having graduated in Bemidji. And so, at the time, I just so happened to start to get an offer on a job in Redwood Falls, and the planner position for the city of Willmar opened up, and I was like, I think that's actually what I want to do. I'm interested in. I was doing some GIS work at the time, which is very much it's important work. We were working on transforming, playing a role in transforming the 911 system. So of all things, making sure it was location based and doing some back end work there. So that's a whole other story. But I was like, I can't sit behind the computer all of the time. It's important work, but it's just not work for me. And so the opportunity to work in community and with people, even though I don't think I fully knew what that was going to look like or mean, was what I wanted to do. Or what I wanted to try.
Planner.
Yeah. So I came for the city to become the city planner for Willmar.
That's a big job.
Yeah, it is. I think I was young and I was like, this sounds fun. Let's try it, right?
So, why not?
Yeah.
So before that, you were into geography, and you said GIS. What is GIS?
GIS is Geographical Information System. So computer mapping, cartography, data analysis.
And that position brought you over to Africa?
So there was a stop in Africa along the way while I was actually in school. So my planning professor had been going to a myriad of countries in Africa for about 20 years, and he brought students with him every other year. And so when I was very young, and I don't know why, but he decided that I needed to come with him. And as the young college student, that sounded really exciting to me.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't I? So I packed up my bags twice, and we went over there in 2015 and in 2017. And I stayed over there for, a couple, 3 months at a time with him. He was studying, at that particular time, we were in rural Kenya in a town called Kibwezi, which is halfway between the capital city of Nairobi and the main coastal city of Mombasa. Halfway between there on the road, like the Nairobi-Mombasa road. And he was studying spiritual geographies.
Okay.
This podcast is going places.
Okay, I love it.
Nobody expects.
I think it's great.
So spiritual geography, so is this idea that, or not this idea, it's the study of how place and spiritual understanding of the land kind of intersect. So in Kibwezi, the communities, the villages, had these, what they call itembo, which are spiritual, like wood and water resources, or they're spiritual places tied to wood and water, right? And so they're key environmental important places that also have this spirituality tied to them. And so studying what that meant, understanding that history in that land. I actually focused on more of a land rights project. So there's a big monocrop sisal plantation. Sisal kind of looks like aloe. It's like giant. Mm-hmm. It grows this big stalk. You cut the stalk off, right, which then keeps the leaves growing. And when you harvest the leaves, you harvest it for its fiber. So it's been used in, you might see like an occasional sisal rug or a sisal bag. It's also used in the car industry and a myriad of other things. We think, so Kenya was a British colony. We think kind of right towards the end of that British colony when this sisal plantation was established, we think that they took land that dissolved about a dozen villages. So they just pushed them out.
Okay.
And it depends on your view of land rights and land ownership as to whether that was a taking or that was like legal, if you will. I would not say it was legal. I might be biased, but so there's this taking of all of this land. The sisal plantation itself is about the size of Minneapolis proper.
Wow.
So it's giant, right? Which is why we think about 12 villages disappeared because of their taking of land. Wow. That still exists. That still has a lot of really violent history of violence against bodies and violence against life and all sorts of things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So studied a lot of that in rural places. And again, I think not necessarily thinking that I'd always work outside of major metropolitan areas, but definitely having that theme of food and land and people and rural places. And yeah.
So when you went over there, was that one of your first times being outside of the country? Have you had other experience?
Yeah, I had been to Costa Rica once on a science trip in like middle school.
Sure. Because
our science teacher was great.
Sure.
So I had been out of the country once, but that was it. And so as an 18-year-old, my mom was like, "You're going to do what?
Yeah.
You're going where?"
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I was bound and determined. So we went and we spent some time in Europe a little bit before that and then went to Kenya and then.
Just of all the things that you learned.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Incredible.
About everything. Cultures, communities, people.
Yeah. So
you came back, graduated. Now we're in Willmar. You're taking on this city planning job.
Yeah.
And?
So I started as the planner, and then shortly thereafter, we always joke that like planning, economic development is kind of the dumping grounds of like if somebody has a project that they don't really quite have the right home for, it becomes our job.
The planner's job.
The planner's job, which is like, you know, it makes it fun. It makes no 2 days are alike. And sometimes you're on projects and you're like, how am I a part of this again?
Right.
Why am I here? But, yeah. I mean, I love it. It's great. So shortly after I started, the city was talking with an organization that's now called Rethos. It was the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota, which was the organization that ran Minnesota Main Street and is in charge of supporting all of the Main Street affiliated cities throughout the state. So at that time, there was only, I don't even know that there was quite a whole dozen of us, maybe about a dozen of us, and it's grown since. But so Rethos was talking to the city because previously Willmar Main Street was a separate organization. And so they had dissolved, and Rethos really wanted to see Willmar Main Street continue and wanted to kind of innovate with the city around what does it look like for the city to actually have ownership of a Main Street program, and what sort of advantages or disadvantages does that create. And so being the new staff person, naturally, right? Why not have Sarah give this a shot? Who even knows if it's going to stick around? So quickly added that to my role of kind of working on reestablishment and just kind of reimagination, reinvigoration of this Willmar Main Street program, which was all about taking the assets of downtown and helping downtown continue to be and grow as a thriving place in Willmar.
So when you took on that role, about that time, I want to hear, is that about the time that you went through our startup boot camp program?
So right around that time is when I actually went through startup with another board member to really help us think about what is this program? How do we talk about it? What's the language we use? What does it mean to be a program of the city? And
what was, so I know Willmar has, just as any small community, it has evolved, it has changed. What was the state of downtown when you started in this role, or of Main Street Willmar?
Yeah, I think downtown had really evolved by the time I had come to place. So this was about, for reference, it was like early 2018, right? Within the first half of the year, both when I came to the city and took over this program. And so I think a lot of work had been done and a lot of work had shifted even over the 5 years prior to that, of just what is downtown, the identity of downtown. Like it's a really classic thing we learn in planning when you talk about downtowns and malls, right? And this evolution of everything used to be downtown, right? That was the economic kind of business center of places and of cities. And a lot of cities have the good fortune of that's how they remain, right? I think of New London or Spicer.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the mall, but what the malls did was in the 60s and 70s was this idea of like, we're going to enclose downtown, right? And so then everything moved to the mall. And then, as we all know, malls have since evolved and need some reimagination themselves.
Yes.
But that doesn't always mean that those same retailers then decided to move back downtown. Often that evolution of the mall and just the increasing vacancies of malls has to do with those retailers and the evolution of the internet. Those retailers just no longer exist in person or maybe exist at all. And so that means we've got all of this space and all of these places that need that community breath to really like keep them going and think about what is downtown Willmar. And I think Willmar has a really unique identity with downtown, especially because downtown was really established because of the rail depot, right? We were established because we were the big depot spot outside of St. Paul. But when the Highway 12 bypass came through, it knocked down that like really key core initial identity of downtown. And so who is downtown? What is downtown when you no longer have that corridor that was oriented to the railroad and why it existed in the first place? And so I think there's always been this push-pull of like, what is Main Street, right? And I think you can point to so many different streets for so many different reasons to find that answer. And people connect with different places in that way because of their experience. And so I think a lot of the work that we were trying to do with Willmar Main Street when it first reestablished was really getting that collective effort behind downtown is a really important place. Yeah. And everybody belongs down there. And we want it to be a place that everybody finds belonging in.
Now, when you say that, Betsy still remembers that when you went through Startup Boot Camp, the tagline you came up with was, "You belong here."
Yeah.
And so I think, like, that's super impactful.
Yeah.
And it says a lot, especially about when you think about downtown Willmar and even, the evolution of the 10 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, you belong here. Downtown Willmar is a really cool space.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much happening.
Absolutely.
There is so much going on. There's so many small businesses. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that the work that you did in the Willmar Main Street Project, it did unify the businesses that were down there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, we were talking about it before, right? Downtown looks so different. It's the hub, both like what it used to be and what it is now, and also downtown Willmar compared to so many other downtowns. And I think often it can make people pause and feel a little uncomfortable because they're just not used to it. But it's such a beautiful multicultural place of so many things happening. I mean, you can stand on the corner there in any evening and you just have people walking around and you have people going into the shops and maybe they're buying groceries from Amin Grocery or they're at Foxhole or Spurs enjoying dinner together or something like that. I mean, there's just so many things happening down there at any given time. And I think if you don't take that step outside your comfort zone to just go experience it, it can feel really distant.
Yeah. Yeah. So with your work that you did down there, how did you make it feel connected, or how did you make it feel like it does now?
Yeah, I think the first thing we really wanted to do was really get that unified voice. And I think one thing I was thinking about and reflecting of some of these questions was that startup really allowed us to think about the role that Willmar Main Street had played previously and all of the really important work that had happened leading up to this step of the city taking on the program, and in us taking that step further of we're gonna keep evolving and we're gonna keep unifying downtown and we're gonna keep finding that sense of belonging. I think I had the advantage of downtown can often feel very African, right? Because we have so many small entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
But as somebody who had lived in East Africa for many, many months, it felt like home, right? And so it was just this really natural way for me to really quickly find my home here and find like my place here, and be able to really just start by building connections and building relationships with our entrepreneurs, getting to know who they were and what their businesses were, and right, like why this place? Why are you here of all places? And helping find that commonality. I think one thing that the Main Street America program does really well is really encouraging those program managers and just communities to work from your assets, right? To work from what you already have. And so unlike a lot of other communities, downtown Willmar has a low vacancy rate, which is wonderful. We've got shops that maybe they don't open right away in the morning, but they're open later into the evening, right? So there's activity throughout the day. And we just have really passionate business owners down there that really care about being there and what downtown is and how they play a role in that.
I think that you are the perfect person for this job. Like, who would have thought that your experiences in school, traveling to Kenya, traveling to Africa, learning about the culture, coming back into Willmar, Minnesota as a city planner of all places, and even like your experience in high school working with these entrepreneurs up north, like everything kind of blended together, and it was like the universe sent Sarah here to do this thing. And I also respect, in listening to you speak, I really respect that you have you put a lot of value in history. Yeah. And like it's not that happened and now it doesn't matter. It's that happened. This is where we are. how can we build on it? Let's keep it moving forward. And I think that's really cool, especially for a young person at your age when you came here as a city planner. Like, holy cow.
Yeah.
It really is like the universe beamed you down, like put you right here in our community. Yeah. So I'm seeing you like going into all these small businesses and you're making connections, you're meeting business owners and entrepreneurs, and it was just easy for you.
Yeah. Well, and I always think back to, I think, again, I was like, I think a lot of this was me being naive, right? But I started that job and they were like, okay, what are your, what's your goals? What are you going to do the first 6 months? And I was like, I'm just going to get to know the place. Like, that's my role, right? Is like, I just need to know, I need to know the community first before I can be this person who's never lived here, who's coming from the outside. Like, we're going to do these things, right? And that's just never the approach that will ever feel comfortable. I think for me, it's always... It has to be ground up. It has to be community driven.
So when you said that, that's also like Willmar is a pretty tight knit community.
Oh,
and I think a lot of rural communities in Minnesota are that way.
Absolutely.
I was born here. My parents were born here. My grandparents were born here or in the neighboring town. Yeah. Like there's some deep rooted family.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So you were a transplant to Willmar. And you became this leader. Yeah. I mean, people look to Sarah.
Yeah, I don't.
And
that always blows my mind a little bit.
I mean, it's just the combination of what happened. But I think your approach of being so authentic, and I think your approach of caring. I mean, I've sat in a room with you a few times, and I've gone, wow, she really cares. Yeah. Like, she really loves what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting, too, about me making the move then from being the city planner to like almost exactly 2 years ago, then stepping outside my comfort zone and taking on this role of being the business development manager for the Economic Development Commission, because I was like, I love planning. Like, I love what I do there. I love that, I get to work with people on projects, and it might not always be business focused. It might be more community oriented. But I think that's part of the nature of just what the Economic Development Commission is here too, is we do so much with businesses and I think twofold. I think we do so much with businesses, but economic development has shifted so much to also be that kind of community development role where we recognize that childcare and housing and broadband and these really important infrastructure things are key to supporting our businesses. But I also think because we're in a rural place, like rural places are our entrepreneurs. Like that's what our communities are. Yeah. And so being able to support them is ultimately supporting the community and what the community wants. So
tell us a little bit about your role now. I mean, you just did, but let's get like what do you do? Business development director.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Just depends on the day, right? There's nothing new there. But I tend to focus on, I lead our broadband and our agriculture committees.
Thank you, by the way.
Yes, of course. And doing lots of big, important work there. We've taken on a lot of new childcare programs and programming, grant programs, different things this year. And so I've been leading a lot of that work. And then right when I was coming into the EDC, they had just started working on this program called Elevate, which uses a curriculum from Rising Tide Capital based out of Jersey City. You're like Jersey City and Willmar. Why in the world? But we use this beautiful curriculum that helps teach underserved entrepreneurs all about business ownership. And so I get to lead the management of all of that work too.
And you're actually there in attendance with the classes as well?
Yeah.
So every week, this is a 12-week
program.
Every week you have a different topic. You're looking at a different aspect of business.
Yeah. So we start a lot with who are you as a business owner? What does entrepreneurship mean? How does personal finance affect you as a business owner, right? You want to keep those things separate. Right. Please keep those things separate. But there are some interconnectedness there.
Of course.
How they relate. And then I think where the curriculum really shines is in the financial background side of business ownership, right? So we talk about pricing and break-even analysis and cash flow and all of those good, really wonderful things. And it feels like we go back to elementary school, right? We're making you do the long-handed version of it all so that you really understand what those components of business ownership are, that you feel confident in them, so you can be successful long term.
And just like you had told me in your last program, so the last 12-week program, how many businesses went through?
So in this particular one that we're graduating at the end of June, we'll have 19 graduates.
Unbelievable.
Go through.
All within our region?
Yeah, all within Kandiyohi County. 2 of them I will make a stipulation. So this was the first semester we taught it in both English and Spanish, which is a very exciting moment. But our Spanish class actually attracted a couple people from Hutchinson that are driving over to also participate, because there's just nothing like it. And so I think the thing that a lot of like business support practitioners are always nervous about is like, I'm going to invest all of this time and energy and financial resources into creating this thing, but will I have enough people to keep doing it, right? So we've run it for 5. This is our 5th semester now. At the end of June, when we graduate this current class, that will be our Spanish class ends today. They got stuck in a snowstorm really early on in the semester and couldn't have class, so they're a week off from our English class. But by the end of graduation, we'll have 50 alumni. So we're really excited about that, and just
that is awesome.
Our wait list continues to grow. The people that I have alumni call me all the time. Oh, I just talked to somebody who I think should go through class, or who's interested in starting a business, or whatever it might be. And
a really eclectic group of businesses.
Very eclectic.
I mean, that's the cool part. Like there are people doing all sorts. Of things.
Absolutely.
People who are creating product, running restaurants, have grocery stores. I mean, it's
services.
So cool.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards. And I think that's where I love this curriculum we use, because I just think it magically meets people where they are.
Yeah.
We really target, our smallest, newest entrepreneurs, those within their first 5 years that, maybe have some sort of experience doing something or have already established something and just really need that additional support.
Well, and I think we've had a few of your Elevate graduates come through our business reinvention programs and our Startup Bootcamp programs as well. And I think the cool part about when you gather together these groups of entrepreneurs, the magic is getting them together, and they create these conversations, and they're meeting people, and they're seeing other people who are where they're also at. And it just kind of feels like, we're not alone. It boosts their motivation. It boosts their morale. And they're learning new skills and techniques, and they're gaining in their ability to grow their business. Yeah. But also it's like we always say you're falling back in love with your work. You're getting motivated around this business, and we need these entrepreneurs, right? Like, we need them to build our communities.
Absolutely.
So it's so cool. And I've only heard great things about your program too. When people come out of it, they're like, oh, it was so helpful. It was so great. Yeah. And 12 weeks is a commitment.
12 weeks is a huge commitment. Yeah. So we're really grateful to, just like Startup and Reinvention, have the support of SWIF, the Southwest Initiative Foundation, to be able to remove that cost barrier and just ask people. I mean, the time commitment itself can still be too much and just not the right time for people. And a lot of life can happen in 12 weeks. Like, it just naturally does. And so being able to also have this really cool network of Elevate and Startup and Reinvention is such a cool, I think, a really unique fit for the community, and just not something that a lot of other regions have the benefit of having. Yeah, it's pretty great. And like you said, when you were younger too, entrepreneurs are what make up our communities. Yeah. And it's so great to see growing entrepreneurs and growing communities. Mm-hmm. So Sarah, around all of your work, I think that your why has been present from the beginning of this conversation. Can you share with us what your why is? Yeah. So I believe that the strongest communities are created when everybody is at the table and minority voices are centered. Did I get it? Oh, I think I got it. Oh, you got it. You did great. Why? Well, first of all, that's perfect. And I think, we can see how that why has, it's been through so many iterations. It's followed you through this journey, right? Yep. And it will continue following you through a journey.
Now, in your why, I like that when you said that I believe that, strong communities are built when everyone is at the table.
Yeah.
And minority voices are at the center.
Yeah.
Why does that piece come in, and why is it such a big piece?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. When I was thinking about that phrasing and was really working on crafting that, actually, I think during startup, probably, I'm sure. Table is really specific because I feel connection to community, like particularly through food and through the kitchen, and just gathering people. So that feels very me and like has a very specific place. But then that addition of making sure those minority voices are centered and really those like underserved voices are centered is because that's our community that experiences the biggest barriers. And so by centering those voices, it's like that image, right, of you've got like the dad and the brother and the little brother that are all trying to see the baseball game over the fence. And by centering the voices, it's like the goal is that you're removing the fence, right? You're just taking away the barrier altogether. You're centering those voices. You're learning from that lived experience that they're bringing to the table to really challenge how we've done things or why we're doing things and how we can do them better to better serve our whole community.
You say that with such clarity. Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can hear the passion that's behind your voice with it too. But I'm going to ask you now, so this is the Lost and Found podcast. Mm-hmm. And we always say that people maybe come into one of our programs and they're kind of feeling lost or just don't have a clear vision of where they're headed. Mm-hmm. And our goal is when they come out of the program, they feel like they found it, they have clarity, they have a path. So when I heard you, that was said with such clarity and explained. It was so clear to me, like I understand it. Mm-hmm. How have you had a lost and found moment? How did you get to this question, place? And I think,
so the thing that always comes to me, so I started college very, very, very young, and I took advantage.
People do.
Yeah, like I took advantage of Minnesota's PSEO program, the post-secondary education option, right? And so I was just one of those kids who was like, I am ready to get out of this building. I've been in the same building since second grade, and I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm done. And because of the fortune of having my grandparents living right across from Bemidji State, I was one of those rare kids that had the opportunity to go like full-time on campus.
Wow.
At Bemidji State. And even more rare, like I always say, PSEO is not for everybody, but when it's the right fit, it works well. So not only did I go full-time on campus, I chose to stay there, and I had found this niche in geography like right away. And that was only because I was required to take a world geography class to finish my high school requirements. Mm-hmm. So I had to take this class, and it was like the first or second one I had sat in on the very first day of me being on campus. It was this big lecture hall. And the professor I ended up going to Africa with was teaching. And he just showed this video that like totally entranced me of just geography of like places and people and land and how it all connects. And so over and over in that department, we always use the phrase like geography is how people make place out of space. Okay. Right. So as a very young 16-year-old, I'm introduced to placemaking before I even know what placemaking is. And just had this like aha moment of like, I know I was good at math, but I like it's like, I don't want a degree in math. I can do some other things, but like geography just very quickly was my, this is it moment. And then I think slowly from there, it's just been there's been small aha moments all throughout that journey of like, oh yeah, this is how that connects to this thing and that thing and this thing. And it all weaves back to that moment of just, falling in love with geography.
Well, and so it sounds to me that you had the ability, and I think sometimes people don't always identify or recognize with things that, are making them tick or making them feel like, oh, this is right for me. This feels good. So you've had the ability to recognize that in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think when I'm hearing you say that, like the geography and the connections and like, oh, this connects to this, which brings me to this, which brings me to this. It's making me think of all of the roles that you've had in your career life as well. And I think whenever you've taken a role or you've maybe had a position, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you step into it and you kind of make it into something unique to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like how... And I think that when we're able to do that and we're able to recognize the things that kind of make us tick, that's also when we start loving the work that we're doing and we're creating a bigger impact in what we're doing.
Yeah.
So how have you kind of evolved these positions or roles that you are in to like fit your strengths and what you love doing?
Yeah. Well, so I think for both situations, the city planner and now this economic development commission position, I've had the good fortune of like coming in right as new programs have come to be, right? That I've been granted the like ability to kind of run with, and utilized those avenues as the opportunity to do a lot of that molding and to really set out like what is this thing that this organization is creating and how do we start it off on that foot. And I think, I mean, personally, I really go back to that startup, to that experience of going through and how do you really weave these two things together of knowing the why of both myself, but then of this program too. And I think, you know, just naturally as the leader of a program, there's going to be some sort of imprint of yourself in that thing. Yeah.
Well, and it's so good that there is.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people say, but you really like your job. And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, it's a job that fits to me, and you kind of find pieces of your job that you really love that you get to grow in, right?
Yeah.
And when you get momentum going and things are moving forward, like no one's going to stop you with that. Like, hey, you're doing great. You keep doing it. So whatever you're doing, you keep going.
Yeah.
And even before you had come in today, we were talking a little bit about event that we have coming up, or a gathering of economic development community people coming together.
Yeah.
But you had said that evolution is one of the biggest things that maybe the economic development community and small business community is struggling with right now. And when you said it, I was kind of looking at you in a way of like, okay, evolution as in small businesses, evolution as in communities, evolution as in where businesses are going. But I think what really struck me was that you recognize and you're seeing out into the future, like you're seeing it now, but you're able to look out ahead and see like, how is this going to impact us in a few years? We really got to get behind it now. Things are going to look different, so we got to start doing things differently now.
Yeah, for sure.
And you kind of explained it as having 2 feet, like one foot in each door. Like, this is traditional. This is where we're going. So how are we going to get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a gift too, to be able to look out into the future and not to be afraid of it. Like, you're running towards it. Like, let's do this, you guys. People need us. How are we going to meet them there?
Yeah. I think that's a really great way of putting it, is I very much am a person who believes that we as like public entities and as just practitioners that are helping entrepreneurs like really have to meet people where they're at. And that looks a lot different now than it used to.
And as it should. I mean, it's like you said, it's constant evolution. It's new people coming into businesses. It's young entrepreneurs starting businesses. Which is great. And that's what makes it fun. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I have another question for you for all of the businesses that you work with, which you work with a huge, such a diverse spectrum, multilingual, multicultural, female, male. I mean, you kind of have it all. You kind of work with everything. But I'm wondering if there are 2 or 3 things about the multicultural communities that you want everybody to know.
Yeah. Okay.
What would a few of those things be?
Yeah. So I think the first and foremost, and it goes back to the table a little bit. First and foremost, the thing that I always talk about when people are, you know, how do I do more of this work in my community, or, well, those people just aren't here, right? And I think that's where I always have the biggest pause. And I think it's this deep-rooted understanding that everybody, regardless of who you are, regardless of your identity, regardless of where you've come from, everybody brings experience to the table. Like that fundamental understanding is so, so important, because I think it shifts our mindset away from some of our implicit biases that we tend to have of, oh, this person who wants to start this grocery store whose first language is not English has no idea what she's doing, right? When in fact, she in Thailand ran a grocery store with her mom, right? Like she's done this before. She knows how to reach her customers. She knows what her customers want. She just needs to navigate this really complex American permitting craziness some days, right? Like,
yeah.
So by fundamentally having that understanding of like everybody brings experience, and especially like that expertise, that lived experience to the table, I think fundamentally is key.
Well, it is key. And hearing people's stories and talking to people and just, you know, getting to know where they've come from, the experience that they've had. Like you said, everybody brings something to a table. Like that should be a life motto.
Yeah.
Like that should be in every schoolroom and everywhere, in every place. Everybody's bringing something to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks different. It's going to be different than what your lived experience is. And it doesn't have to be scary. It can feel uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be scary. Yeah. I think one thing we haven't talked about or hasn't come up in some of all of this is that throughout all of this, I've also been involved in speech through all of it. And I was in Inform, and again, another story for another day. But one of my Inform students who's looking at some research for next year recently came across this really beautiful article explaining about implicit bias and how a lot of that bias of ours stems from our brain's really natural inclination to like categorize people as other, right? And to like, they're different from us, they're other. And so it's often, she equates it to peanut butter and jelly. And so not everybody thinks of peanut butter and jelly and that association, right? Whether they had an allergy growing up or if that like culturally wasn't the food they ate. But that's kind of part of the point, right? Is those who grew up on peanut butter and jelly, we hear that association and it becomes the common association, and that's just, it's implicit. It's just what happens. And so when we start to categorize as other, and we have, we absorb ourselves in media that categorizes as other or whatever it might be, it's really easy to make those common associations, right? Women are emotional, or whatever it might be, right? Insert the type of person and the association you have with them. And so the important thing is to acknowledge it, not to try to push it away. And when you acknowledge it, then start to make that really conscious change too, of wanting to get to know people's stories and wanting to get to learn from each other and center those minority voices, center that lived experience.
You work with such a variety of small business owners, and seeing that everybody brings something to the table. Everybody has value. Everybody's coming. Like you said, I like what you just said about recognizing and learning, hearing people's stories and kind of seeing where they're at. It's really a gift of yours. With all the businesses that you've worked with, there was a new entrepreneur coming to you saying, I think I'm going to start a business. Or for all the young entrepreneurs that are listening, what is some advice that you have that's kind of a universal piece of advice to small business owners?
Starting a business is never as simple as you think it's going to be. And the business plan is really important. Because I think it often feels like it's the thing we can glaze over. It's the thing like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. But by sitting down, putting that document together, really thinking about what are you bringing to the community? What are you bringing to the world? What's your purpose? What's that unique selling proposition? By really thinking through those details, you're setting yourself up for the greatest success.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah.
It's great advice. And sitting down and doing a business plan like that too, it's not always going to stay the way that you write it. It's not always going to be this is what I'm doing.
Document.
It's a living document.
Yes.
But it really does challenge your brain and brings you to thinking about different scenarios and parts of your business that you're not going to get surprised by once you get started down the road a little bit too. You're like, yeah, we planned for this. We thought about this. You know, we've had this conversation. Yeah. And I think it keeps the momentum moving forward in your business as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing I would say too is like, know that there are supporters out there. There's so many different, Minnesota especially is really fortunate to be broken up into all of these different regions, right? We've got regional planning commission or regional development commissions. We've got initiative foundations. You've got county or city level economic developers. Like all of those different organizations tend to have some sort of entrepreneurial business development support arm to what they do. You've got the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Development Centers. I mean, there's just so many different layers to what they do. And if you get paired with or find, you know, the first entry point that you might have to some of that support doesn't feel like the right fit, that's okay. And and that's why I think there's so many of us, is that not everybody needs the same type of support or person to support them. And so by having all of these different resources, that can be
So where do people find out about the resources? If there's an entrepreneur listening that's like, hey, I could actually use a little bit of help with XYZ.
I would use Google as a friend. A lot of that support tends to be very location based. So I would tend to search by the county that you're in. And I think if you get somebody saying we're not the right fit for you, I would push back and ask like, okay, can you connect me with somebody that does serve this particular area or place? I wish that there was a better clearinghouse of here's all of the, because not every county has an economic development commission or department. Everybody's structured a little bit differently, and which one takes the lead on different components of that business support. It's just kind of naturally very location based and depends on where you're at. But there is support.
There are resources out there. But by just Googling it in your region or in your area, you're gonna be sent somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Sarah, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I think that our community appreciates the work that you're doing. I have a question, though, before you go.
Okay.
Where do you see our downtown, like the Willmar area downtown, in 5 years? Where do you see our small business community in 5 years?
I would say when I think about downtown Willmar, when I think about our downtowns throughout the county, when I think about Elevate and the network and the alumni base that we're building there, I really see I see a community equipped and confident that's running businesses, that knows where to turn when they've got a question or need support, that know each other and are connected with each other, and are thriving.
That's awesome. Well, there is strength in unity, and there is strength in bringing people together around a table, right? We're building community. You're building community. Entrepreneurs build community, and by connecting them and growing with them and helping them learn and move forward, I mean, I see the vision. It's in action. It's in action. So thank you for all the work that you're doing around that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for all the work you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, happy to.
Yeah.
It's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, before we go, I think, like I said, the work you're doing is very important. You're growing communities. You're growing our small businesses, our community of entrepreneurs, our downtowns. I mean, it's pretty great. So if we have a small business out there that wants to learn a little bit more about the EDC or the Elevate program, where do they go? What can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 websites. For the EDC, you can visit us at just kandiyohi.com, which is the county we cover. So Kandiyohi.com for Elevate. If you want to get plugged in there, maybe you want to inquire about a future semester. Our next one will start towards the end of August or beginning of September. You can head over to elevatecba.com, and learn more about, you can read some stories about some of our alumni. You can fill out the form. It's like your name, your email, and your preferred language. Really simple. And just get on our wait list to get more information about upcoming information sessions there as well.
All right. And you said that the cost of the program is oftentimes...
No cost to attend as entrepreneurs. We just ask for the cost of your time, which we know is significant.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, Sarah, why do you love your work?
I love my work because I get to work with people in community, helping them create the visions that they want to create.
Awesome. Happy to have you. Thank you for joining us on the Lost and Found podcast. Thanks for the work that you're doing. And I'm excited for our future work that we get to do together as well.
Me too.
Good things are happening.
Yes.